Welcome back to Proxy Hammer, everybody. And today we're going to be talking about a question that's been around for a while now, and that is the choice between the Night Spinner and the Fire Prism. So everyone knows they come in the same model kit. A lot of players that are getting into the game really like the grav tanks for the heavy support, but they don't know which to choose. So what is the better choice for competitive play now? So basically, here's the basic profile. Now, I use the Fire Prism profile, but it's the same for all grav tanks, essentially, except for Wave Serpents are a little different. Movement 16, Ballistic Skill 3, Toughness 7, Wounds 12, 3+ save. That's essentially the most important aspects to this. You're never going to be in combat with it unless it's absolutely, unless it's either about to die, or you're just kind of throwing it in to tie up an enemy unit, in which case its weapon skill 6+ and 3 attacks aren't going to really matter. Strength 6 is definitely not going to matter. So not really a big deal, but this is the basic profile. As you can see, as it gets wounded, its profile basically gets lowered. It doesn't have as much movement, ballistic skill, and attacks. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at the Fire Prism. Now, the only real difference between the Fire Prism and the Night Spinner is obviously the weapon, right? The Fire Prism has the Prism Cannon, and the Night Spinner has the Doom Weaver. So let's take a look at the Prism Cannon. So the Prism Cannon has a dispersed shot. It's heavy D3, which means on average you'll get about 6 shots with it. Strength 6, -2 AP, and damage 2. Now, this isn't spectacular, to be honest. The reason being is the 60 range is nice, but I mean, to be honest with you, strength 6, AP 2, damage 2 with 6 shots. So essentially you're going to roll dice. You're going to get 4 hits, probably about 3 wounds. And most Space Marine characters, which is what this is designed to kill, will either be in cover and light cover, and they'll get +2 to their armor, which essentially negates the AP. Now, or excuse me, not +2, +1, plus the armor of contempt ability, which negates another one. So they're essentially just going to be sitting on the same armor they were originally, which is 3+. And that's just not very cost effective. Now, it is okay. You'll probably kill about 1 Space Marine, but it's just not that good, to be honest. And it's arguably better just to go with the Focus Lance, even against heavy infantry, by the way, in smaller units. So if it's in a unit of 5, now, the math isn't as good, but, I mean, it's almost as good, which, because of the high AP, you're almost guaranteed to at least get 1 kill anyway with the Focus Lance. So, Dispersed Pulse is really only better against, hordes of enemies, and even then, it's arguably not even worth shooting the Fire Prism at. So, the Dispersed Shot is not really good. It's just decent at picking off a couple Space Marines here and there. Not really effective. However, when you look at the Lance variant's excellent at killing heavy tanks. Strength 14, which means most tanks are going to wound on 2s. It can use the Linked Fire ability, which essentially ignores armor saves, invul saves, and negates most of the armor of the enemy target. If you have multiple Fire Prisms, so you can get multiple shots and ignore invul saves as well. Now, this is very important for dealing with, pesky and vulnerable saves, but especially, get this, especially the new Tyranid Codex. The new Tyranid Codex is absolutely filled with invul saves, synaptic imperatives, I believe gives an invul save to enemy units within range for a turn. I'm going to have to look at the specifics of that Tyranid rule, but it does give some sort of invul save, and a lot of the characters and monsters in the Tyranid Codex also have some sort of invul save. So the Focus Lance is excellent at taking these things out. It has a good range, so it can hit the enemy basically anywhere on the board from turn 1, as long as it's in line of sight. Strength 14 means it's going to wound most things on 2s. Some of the tougher Tyranid creatures, though, however, are going to be wounded on 3s, but that's all right. And damage is going to be about 6 on average. per time you score a wound. So what that means is if you have 3 Fire Prisms shooting at a wound 15 Tyranid creature, chances are that creature is going to die. And that's good. That means that you're taking out and focusing your fire on these things and successfully destroying them. So the Lance is very good. The Focus Lance, very good at killing tanks and killing heavy monsters like that. And if you just take a quick look at linked fire, you'll see that basically what happens is you choose another Fire Prism within 12. The model that you choose to shoot gets 2 extra attacks, which is essentially the same as the other one would. The advantage here is you only need to draw line of sight to 1 Fire Prism to 1 creature to do this. The other one doesn't need line of sight to the enemy, just to the Fire Prism. And not only are you not losing any efficiency, you're actually gaining line of sight efficiency, but you're actually also ignoring invul saves. Invulnerable saving throws cannot be made against any attacks made by that model with that weapon. Wow. Okay, so essentially this is going to be very powerful especially for the new Tyranid Codex. A lot of tanks out there don't have invul saves, so this ability, I think when some people saw it, was like, oh man, it's not really that great. Most of the time, it's just not even going to be used, right? But in some cases, it would be used, but not usually. Now, with the Tyranid Codex, it's going to be used a lot. So it is 2 command points, but it is worth it if you have multiple Fire Prisms on the board. And I think you should always probably run them in at least units of 2, squads of 2. Just not have 1 Fire Prism, but at least 2 Fire Prisms for this ability is very powerful, especially against Tyranids. Now, flipping back to the Night Spinner, the Night Spinner does cost less. It has slightly better anti-infantry than the Fire Prism, and it has the ability to indirect fire. So it's heavy 2d6 instead of heavy 3d3. This will, on average, give you about 1 more shot. It has 1 more strength. Other than that, it's basically the same, except it has indirect fire as well. So that means that it can shoot at targets out of line of sight. However, here's the problem with the Night Spinner. The recent nerf to indirect fire really hurt its cost effectiveness. Basically, units that are out of line of sight now basically benefit from an additional -1 to hit, which is you have -1 ballistic skill, and they get +1 armor. So against, for example, marine targets out of line of sight, they're going to get a 2+ armor save, essentially, which is way, way powerful. And most of the time, you're going to be hitting on 5s if they're in dense terrain or behind dense terrain. And you're going to be hitting on... they're going to get a 2+ armor save, and you're going to be hitting on 5s. So that's terrible. That's really bad damage. And if you do the math on that, it's like maybe you kill 1 Space Marine. Maybe. If they're in a squad of 10, you'll kill a little more. But usually you'll just kill 1. And that's terrible, right? So here's the problem with the Night Spinner in my mind now. When you compare them, you obviously know just right off the bat that the Night Spinner is better at dealing with infantry, especially light infantry now. But unfortunately, the main draw to the Night Spinner was the fact that it had that indirect fire, and it could stay safe behind terrain itself, out of line of sight, without really having to make it vulnerable to enemy shooting, and at the same time, it was able to deal damage to other units out of line of sight. So it could deal with the enemy units out of line of sight that are planning, some nefarious things, the steal objectives and things like that, without having to reveal itself. So unfortunately, it can't really do that effectively anymore. The damage is just not there at all. And I think there are much better options that can reach out of line of sight targets without the penalties of indirect fire. So the question becomes, which one do we choose? Because obviously they have their strengths and weaknesses. And both of them are actually not great at killing Marines now. So which one do we do? So I think even though the dispersed shot is actually lacking a lot in power, it's not that much worse than the Night Spinner in terms of damage. Now, I know that may be a shock to some of you out there, but against infantry, it's really not that much worse in terms of damage and performance. It still kills about 1 Space Marine. The Night Spinner kills about 1 Space Marine. They're about the same. And the Fire Prism has the Focus Shot, which is extremely good at killing tough things like vehicles and monsters, especially with linked fire, being able to ignore invul saves as well. So I think the Fire Prism obviously has a lot more versatility in that way. And I think basically what that means is that, in my opinion, I think taking the Fire Prism might be the better answer going forward. Now, that may be, a lot of players might look at that and maybe disagree with that, and that's okay. I do like the Night Spinner. I've always liked the Night Spinner. But I just look at the math behind it, and I'm like, I don't know if the math adds up anymore for me. Especially in tournaments. You're going to see a lot more Marine armies now. People are going to be wanting to field, more Space Marines because of the Armor of Contempt. And you're just going to get a lot less effectiveness out of your Night Spinner over the course of the game. And indirect fire is powerful. It's a very convenient ability to have. But unfortunately, it just doesn't do a lot of damage, especially because of the recent nerfs to indirect fire and the buffs to Space Marines together. Kind of hurt the Night Spinner in a way that's it's just not really cost effective anymore. So I think there's better units now that can fulfill that same role for Fire Prisms, for Night Spinners. So Warp Spiders, Swooping Hawks, a lot of units that can get behind the enemy lines, shoot at their targets, and then basically get to safety. So both of those units have that ability, and both of those units also benefit from the indirect fire nerf because they can hide themselves behind ruins and stuff like that, making enemy indirect fire weapons harder to hit and less likely to kill them. And essentially, Fire Prisms might have a dual bonus now, because not only are they equally bad at killing Space Marines with the Disperse Shot, but they also have one of the best answers to the new Tyranid Menace, which is linked fire, which basically ignores the invul saves from Synaptic Imperatives. So basically, huge monsters that are just extremely nasty in the Codex. I mean, guys, if you took a look at the Codex for a second, I haven't looked at the actual book yet, but I've looked at some of the data sheets for the Tyranids. Their new monsters are insane. And especially the, I want to say the Hydra, the Flyer. Absolutely insane model. Really tough to kill. Has a lot of wounds. Has an invul save, has the ability to have -1 to hit. I mean, it just stacks toughness on itself. It's hard to kill. And this is a great way to deal with that. Linked fire with guide. Remember, when you have guide, you only have to guide one of these, and you get rerolls on everything. So if you do the linked fire, let's say you have 3 Fire Prisms, you do linked fire on both, the main one that's firing gets 4 extra shots, and all of those can be under the benefit of guide. So this is really effective. This essentially means that you can bring down things like those flyers pretty easily in a turn. Yes, it's a big investment, but if you have something in your army that can deal with something like that in tournaments, turn 1, it's going to be a lot easier to actually, a lot easier to win and deal with that.
Yeah, especially since those flyers can deal, I think from what I've heard, they can deal a significant amount of mortal wounds to enemies, and deal a lot of wounds to things and targets and stuff like that. They can kill tanks, they can wreck, infantry squads, pretty much anything in your army as Eldar will be, vulnerable to that. So anything that can deal with that and alpha strike it right off the bat, you don't have to deal with it for the rest of the game, that's fantastic, even if it does cost just under 500 points. For 3 of those bad boys. So, I think you're going to start seeing a lot more Fire Prisms in lists nowadays in tournaments. The Night Spinners, but to be honest with you, you might not see either of them, to be completely honest. They're both pretty expensive, and I think maybe some people might opt for Fire Dragons instead, because Fire Dragons do more damage, but they do require transport. So you might see people start running Fire Dragons and Falcons maybe. And, you know, that could be a very effective anti-tank tool as well, because one Fire Dragon unit can almost take down a creature, a bigger creature like a Carnifex or something like that. So a couple of small Fire Dragon units, so maybe 6 models apiece, can take down a significant number of monstrous creatures in a turn with Falcon support. So that's also another option. It's a little more expensive, but it is an option that Eldar players have as well. But again, Fire Prisms are pretty effective because they can stay at a pretty safe range and still be able to kill things. So it's a trade-off. I think it's definitely a debate whether or not, you know, Falcons with Fire Dragons or Fire Prisms are more effective at dealing with the new Tyranid Menace. Time will tell on that for sure. But, and, you know, also some Math Hammer. I haven't done the math on it yet, but I plan to do it soon and kind of compare the two in a future video. Alrighty, so that's it for today. Thank you for watching, everybody. I know that was a little bit of a longer video, but I felt like I needed to compare these units, especially after the nerf, because, you know, Night Spinners were so popular because of indirect fire, but I think the tables have turned a little bit on them. And I hope you guys had fun watching. I will see you guys next time. And in the next video, I'm going to go over kind of some answers that we have to the new Imperial Guard. So stay tuned. Have a good one.